Hello, my name is Kyle. Welcome to this session that discusses the support that's been added for the return of the whole purchase order, which is available in Release 22A of the Oracle Utilities Work and Asset Cloud Service product. In this session, we'll talk about this new feature and how it can impact your business. Let's go through a quick review of the agenda to give you an idea of what we'll be covering in this session. First, I'll give you an overview of the work that's been completed, followed by more detail to explain how you can use it and the benefits it provides to your business. Then, we'll walk through a live demonstration of the new functionality. And finally, I'll explain what you need to consider when implementing this new functionality in your business and provide you with some additional resources. When we say support the return of the whole purchase order, what we mean is that we've added the ability for a user, typically a storeroom clerk, to select one or more purchase order lines when adding or receiving return inventory record to the system. This allows a user to return multiple items from a single purchase order, either for credit or exchange, using an easy-to-use pick list, providing a better, more efficient user experience. This work modifies the way a storeroom clerk processes receiving return records. It provides a new PO return line item dialog that enables processing of one or many PO lines in a single receiving return inventory transaction. It supports all types of inventory items, lot managed items, as well as tracked assets. It removes multiple clicks and lookups, truly simplifying the processing of receiving return inventory records. Let's take a quick look at a before and after comparison of how this process was performed to illustrate the impact of the changes made in 22A. In our example, the storeroom clerk needs to return a PO for credit that was received in error. The purchase order has 5 purchase order lines, and the entire quantity received for each line must be returned. Prior to 22A, there were 4 steps that needed to be followed. The storeroom clerk opens the main menu and finds the inventory options and adds a receiving return record. In step 2, in the return line dialog, the storeroom clerk will need to search for the PO header and use it to fetch the PO lines that are associated. The first PO line is selected and the details are populated in the return line dialog. In step 3, once the PO line has been selected, the storeroom clerk enters the details for the associated return line. The storeroom clerk will need to have those details close at hand in order to enter the proper quantity to return. Return detail lines for the selected PO line are entered and saved. In step 4, now that the return record has been created, the storeroom clerk completes the return. Adding up those mouse clicks for a single purchase order line, we're at 8 mouse clicks. These steps are repeated for each line, so 5 purchase order lines times 8 mouse clicks per line adds up to 40 mouse clicks in order to process 5 receiving return records. Now, let's compare how this same example is processed in 22A. Using the same example as on the previous slide, the storeroom clerk needs to return an entire PO for credit that was received in error. The purchase order has 5 PO lines, and the entire quantity received for each line must be returned. In 22A, there are 2 steps that are followed. Step 1. From the PO to be returned, the storeroom clerk opens the context menu and starts the add return process. In step 2, the PO return line item dialog opens. The PO header information has been passed into the dialog and fetched all of the related purchase order lines. The dialog provides a multi-select capability to select all of the lines, a dynamic defaulting control for the type of return to be defaulted to each line, with line level control if needed. The quantity details for each line are visible, and if a line is selected, the received quantity defaults to the return quantity, which can be updated if a different quantity is to be returned. With all of this functionality in our new PO return line item dialog, the storeroom clerk can select all of the lines, specify that they'll all be returned for credit, and create the return transaction in 3 clicks. So adding up all of our clicks, we've gone from 40 clicks prior to 22A down to 5 clicks in 22A. It's a huge time and headache saver. Now, I'll take you through a live demo to show you the new PO return line item dialog in action. As we go through the demo, you'll see how the defaulting behavior is slightly different for inventory items versus lot managed items versus tracked assets. I have prepared 3 scenarios to take you through to show you how the PO return line item dialog works for the 3 types of inventory items we support. First, we'll go through an inventory item example. Second, we'll go through a lot managed inventory item example, and finally a tracked asset example. So let's jump right in. In this demo, we'll walk through the typical process we expect a storeroom clerk to follow for creating receiving and return records for inventory items, lot managed items, and tracked assets. There are 3 launch points for creating an inventory receiving return record. The first launch point can be found by navigating to the main menu, selecting Inventory, Receiving Return, and clicking Add to begin the process. If you launch from here, you must provide the PO header details to launch the new PO return line item dialog. The second launch point is from the PO search results page. From one of the records returned by your search, click on the context menu icon in the purchase order header column. Click Add Return. This launches the new PO return line item dialog. Because this is a context menu launch, the system passes the PO header information into the dialog, automatically fetching the related PO lines. The third launch point is from the context menu associated to the information field on the purchase order header. From the information field, click on the context menu icon to open the menu. Click on the Add Return to launch the new PO return line item dialog. Again, because this is a context launch, the PO header has been passed into the dialog and the related purchase order lines have been returned. Let's review how the dialog works. There are a few controls and behaviors that make the storeroom clerk's life much easier. For each purchase order line, the received quantity is displayed, making it clear how many items are available to be returned. When a line is selected for return, the received quantity automatically defaults to the return quantity column. Multi-select capability is available to simplify selecting all purchase order lines for return processing. If I am processing all of the lines of the return, I click the multi-select box in the header, and all of the lines are selected and the return quantities are defaulted. I can click the multi-select again to unselect or deselect all of the lines. If I'm not returning all of the lines, I can use the line level select boxes to select the lines that I am processing. In this example, I'll select lines 1 and 3 for return. Return quantities support partials and fractional returns as well. Here I'll demonstrate that capability. On line 1, of the 12 items received, I'll only return 10. And for item 3 of the 12 items received, I will only return 5.5. The final control to review is the type of return default control. The storeroom clerk can use this control to default the type of return to each line that is being returned, but the value can be overridden at the line level. In my example, for the lines that I've selected, I'll specify an exchange for the first line item and a credit for the third line item. Once the lines have been selected, the type of return determined, and the quantity specified, the storeroom clerk creates the return transactions. With a few mouse clicks, I've created the return transactions for the 2 PO lines in my example. You can see the transactions in the purchase order transaction zone. is the first return line, and here's the second return line. There are a few minor differences to point out when processing a lot managed item and a tracked asset inventory item. Here is a lot managed item example. The purchase order lines are presented by item and then by the lot into which they were received. The quantity received of the item and its related lots are visible. The quantity to be returned defaults at the lot level and can be adjusted or entered at the lot level if needed. The value entered at the lot level sums up to the item level. In my example, I've adjusted the quantities at the lot level for the two lots, and at the item level, the return quantity has adjusted appropriately. Partial and fractional returns are available at the lot level, but cannot exceed the received quantity at the item level. For lot managed items, the type of return default control drives the type of return at the item level, not at the lot level, meaning that for an item received into multiple lots, I cannot have lot 1 being returned for credit and lot 2 being returned for exchange. That type of a scenario would require 2 receiving return transactions. Finally, let's take a look at a tracked asset inventory item example. The received quantity of the item and the asset that was created are both visible. The quantity to be returned is entered at the asset level and sums to the item level. Partial and fractional returns are not available for tracked assets, as I can't return half of the motor that I received. For tracked assets, the type of return default control drives the type of return at the item level, not at the asset level. Meaning for a tracked asset, where multiple assets were received, I cannot have asset 1 being returned for credit and asset 2 being returned as an exchange. That type of a scenario would require 2 receiving return transactions. However, for individual tracked assets, each can have its own type of return, as just demonstrated. That concludes the demonstration. Now let's review implementation advice for enabling this feature. In this section, we'll review what you need to consider before enabling this feature in your business and what you need to know to set it up properly. In order to properly process tracked asset returns, the rejection location specified on the inventory master configuration must be a valid location on the asset type of the tracked asset to be returned, as described here. For additional information about Oracle Utilities, work in cloud service, and the work that was completed to add support for the return of the whole purchase order, see the Oracle Utilities Work and Asset Cloud Service repository on the Oracle Help Center, which is available at docs.oracle.com. This concludes the presentation. Thank you for watching.